I have a fellow health coach out there who is going to be joining us. Her name is Rebekah Farmer. She is the Tailored Keto Health. You might know her that way as well. But either way, she had 10 autoimmune diseases, chronic Lyme's, C-Diff, mood and digestive disorders. And when I say digestive disorders, I mean she had a few. So we're going to bring her on and we're going to kind of chit chat about everything chronic health and gut health and all that good stuff and how to heal. So I see her down there. We're going to bring her on just now.
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to have this chit chat with you.
I'm excited to be here. Oops.
I know, I'm like playing with all the buttons. I'm so unfamiliar with this live thing. So like I've got to hit everything just to make sure that I do it right, I guess. But so one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here, I kind of tuned everybody in, is all your chronic, disorders that you had. And one of the things that I find really neat is that I read that you had osteoporosis in 6th grade. So part of me wonders if like you contracted Lyme that early in life and that's what kind of stole your nutrients, or have you kind of ever thought back into that at all, if that's what triggered the onset of the autoimmune?
I never actually thought about Lyme being the root of the osteoporosis. It's very possible. I believe that a large part of my autoimmune issues came from being on antibiotics. So I was always getting sick as a child, and every time they just put me on antibiotics. And then I also took Adderall, clonazepam, and Ambien for over 13 years. And that severely impacted my gut and my central nervous system and immune system as well. So I'm not really sure where it started. And I do wonder about the osteoporosis. I do. But I know that, a lot of people are born with genetic issues or deficiencies. But thank goodness for epigenetics. So we don't have to be stuck with that.
Yeah, I know that a lot of times with like dealing with chronic infections, because I mean, I was on antibiotics a lot as a child, but I didn't develop C. diff until I was older. In fact, I can like pinpoint when I got C. diff just because I had little incisions that kept getting infected, and the doctor's like, oh, just take more antibiotics, take more antibiotics. I'm like, this ain't right. Like, this should be healing. Wow. And it's not healing. So I actually know, that it was about like 3-4 years ago. And so I had a very short stint with all of that. It took about like 3-4 years for the autoimmune to kick in and for me to just be dying. But I didn't start out that way. I mean, I definitely had, like I said, my chronic issues as a child with antibiotics, but I know that like chronic infections and parasites can steal nutrients, because I was like deficient in zinc. I was deficient in like all my major nutrients. My thyroid wasn't running right because I was deficient in nutrients. So that's what makes me think, I'm like, I wonder what happened that, you got chronically ill so young,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have any like remembrance of like a time where you thought C. diff kind of like came into your life either, just the chronic antibiotic use?
Well, so there was a time where I was losing huge amounts of weight, and that started happening way before, at least 3 years before I was tested. And the weight loss definitely picked up at some point, and I was finally tested, but I remember having a hard time keeping weight on, and I attribute it to taking Adderall.
Okay.
But, at many points I was eating enough, and I still was losing a lot of weight. And it's also hard to tell because I had digestive issues for a long time. I have to wonder if, at one point my niece moved into the home that I was living in, and I've heard that it can be contracted through young children or being in the hospital. And I have had both of those. So I do think that I had it for at least 3 years before I was diagnosed with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how big C. diff is. Now, I worked in a hospital, so like I kind of knew about like MRSA and like chronic infections and stuff like that. But like it really does kind of take your life away. I know like at my lightest, I was 135, and like you could just see like my shoulder bones just like protruding. And yeah, so I initially kind of lost the weight, and then I like had a chronic like where my body was just so stressed out that I actually started to gain weight. I mean, I was trying to lift weights and I would just bloat out and gain weight, and I would try to do anything and I would just gain weight. And I'm just like, what is wrong with me? Because I did keto probably 7 or 8 years. So that's why it was like so weird for me just to get sick. And people think they eat such nutrient dense food that they can't get sick. And here you are sick and then found keto and kind of found some resolve with that, right?
So actually I was keto for over 15 years.
Oh, wow.
I was never on the standard American diet. I, was basically paleo when I was a child. My mom didn't have much processed food or sugar. I mean, we didn't have processed food. And she kept us away from sugar, and I'm really grateful for that. And I grew up keto, like truly. When I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme, that was the first time that I ever actually started tracking my macros. And I was going for like a 4-to-1 fat to protein ratio, and that was super helpful in mitigating the chronic fatigue. I was bedbound for a while. I was having non-epileptic seizures. So that's when I really embarked on this strict ketogenic journey to survive. So it did help a lot with that. But in the end, it was not enough to sustain the damage of my gut. So, I don't think keto is a bad thing at all. In fact, it helped me with a lot, and it helped me with a lot of my mood disorders. It's just the extent of what I was going through. My gut needed more, and many of my keto foods were these foods full of anti-nutrients, baby spinach, turmeric tea every morning, sweet potatoes all the time. I mean, those are the top 3 oxalate foods, and black pepper. So yeah, it's really interesting how everyone really is bio-individual. And there may be a time that I do best with some carbs, like my gut has healed full circle now. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of times people go keto and it's like almonds and nuts and all the time. And like I did it too. Like I was totally guilty about it because I still like my sweet treats.
My coconut butter, it was crack. I was so addicted. Addicted. I mean,
like dark chocolate.
Yeah, I thought about food all the time. I was like, oh man, the keto is life. I'm so free from, food addiction. But it's like, I can't wait for my next fat bomb. I can't wait to make this coconut whatever. And I'm not like, don't get me wrong, people. I think that's great. I think that keto treats are great. And I plan on using them when I have kids. It's a great substitute. But I was still struggling with addiction. And I was not leptin sensitive. And I was missing out on so many nutrients coming from animal foods. I did not realize the bioavailability, and then, just weighing animal fats versus plant fats. Like all of our vitamins are in the animal fats. I didn't even think about that. I was just eating coconut oil all the time.
Yeah, I don't think that we were ever taught that. You know what I mean? Like I always thought meat was protein. I didn't know there was like actual nutrients in meat. So we were always told to eat veggies,
right?
Growing up. But yeah, I mean, keto treats are great for transitioning and breaking food habits and kind of learning. Like it's a lot of work to make a keto treat, so you kind of like end up kind of cutting down naturally. You're like, okay, this is expensive, it takes time, and like it feels a need. Do I really need it? Versus just the like, with the standard American diet, you have all these foods like ready to grab, at any time. You don't really have to spend time and put it in there. But so like the food you said wasn't enough. So then you kind of probably transitioned at some point to carnivore then, or did you start taking supplements, or what was the breaking point where you're like, this is not enough and standard medicine ain't helping me, and where do I go from here? Like, was there a point you just reached where you're like, I'm done going to the doctors and I gotta do something else?
So, I was taking supplements. I mentioned I was keto for over 15 years. I was also taking 20 supplements a day for a long time. I grew up with relatives in the space, and I'm a super data nerd, super into nutrition. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to take all these supplements because I know how. And I used nootropics to get off of the benzopidines and the Adderall, and they helped. So I really geeked out with that for a while, and it did help. But it's expensive, and I wish I had just spent my money on meat, because I was probably peeing out half of those supplements, and who knows which ones were causing issues. So the point that I gave up on traditional medicine doctors is when I started having suffocation attacks, and this was right after wisdom tooth removal surgery, and they gave me antibiotics and opioids to deal with it. And I think that was the last straw of my gut. My central nervous system went totally haywire, and I started having legitimate suffocation attacks. I was in the emergency room on a regular basis. I had to that's when my engagement fell through and I moved back in with my parents. And that's when I decided these meds aren't even working anymore. So I'm going to get off of them even if it kills me, because I'm going to try to get to the root of the problem. That's when I gave up on traditional medicine and I started working with functional medicine doctors. And that was in 2017. And that's when I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. So I continued to work with functional medicine doctors because the Lyme doctors were like, you have to do these IV treatments and take all of these supplements and take all of these tests and basically spend thousands of dollars on a weekly basis to survive. And so I left them. I was like, see ya, like, no one's paying for that. I literally can't. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started working with functional medicine doctors who uncovered a plethora of autoimmune issues. If I had stayed with the Lyme disease doctors, they would have just said, all of your issues are Lyme disease. They never tested for other autoimmune. So I just want to point that out. I've never really pointed that out before. I ran from that place because I seriously had so many red flags. It was like, this is the only answer. It has to be only Lyme disease. Anything else that they say it is, it's just Lyme disease. Well, I actually think it's kind of opposite. I think that Lyme disease is everything else. So you can call it what you want, but, I just heard on a podcast, if everyone tested their pee, 90% of people would test positive for the Lyme spirochetes. But only some of them are actually manifesting the symptoms because we've been exposed to mold or we have other things going on. So anyways, that's when I ditched traditional medicine, discovered the autoimmune issues. I continued to do keto, continued to lose weight. I was misdiagnosed with an eating disorder, held against my will in the hospital, came out of there, continued to do keto. That was the first time I went through the keto rash, which is just oxalate dumping. And so fast forward to 2019, I am not in contact with my own family because they think I have an eating disorder. And I'm 69 pounds, fighting for my life. And I moved to Illinois because I met someone on eHarmony. And I thought that I only had, a couple of years at most to live. And so he ended up being a narcissist, and I was dealing with domestic abuse. So at this point, I was checking myself into the emergency room, asking them to treat me with an eating disorder because I wanted to escape that toxic relationship. I could not stand to be under that roof. I would just lock myself in the room. So they wouldn't treat me in the eating disorder unit because of the C-Diff infection. And they were like, we have to hold you in isolation. That is when I was totally convicted. Praise God. He pretty much just slapped me in the face. And he was like, you're addicted to keto. Drop the keto. It was the only thing that I felt like I had control over. I know keto back and forth, And like I said, I'm a super data nerd. And that was the only thing I felt like I had control over. And that was the one thing that I had to surrender. It was the one thing that was holding me back. And I didn't know why. So I tried carnivore again. But this time in the hospital, I wasn't as strict as just beef, salt, and water, which is what everyone told me to do in the Facebook groups. I just had strangers messaging me, trying to help, but actually making it worse and saying, you just have to do just beef, salt, and water. It'll work if you just do this. And it was like beating my face into a brick wall over and over and over. I couldn't do it. I felt worse. I was having histamine reactions that I didn't know what they were. It wasn't helping any of the autoimmune symptoms. So in that hospital room, I decided I'm just going to cut out the keto foods that are addictive because I know in my heart of hearts, that's not what God desires. And I knew that I was struggling with binge eating at that point. And even though I was 69 pounds, it doesn't validate binge eating. It doesn't. There's no situation that anyone should binge eat, regardless of all the people that were telling me, you just need to eat until you're sick. I had so many people giving me advice like that, and it really messes with your psyche. So I surrendered, and the dietitian in the hospital put me in touch with the chef in the kitchen, and they started sending up entrees of meat, hard-boiled eggs, and butter. And I was literally hoarding this stuff in my hospital room. I was hiding it, and I was throwing out the other trays of 75% carbohydrates that they were sending up. And I gained 4 pounds in 1 week. My blood sugars almost immediately stabilized to where, before they were hypoglycemia in the 30s, and then I would need to get a glucagon shot, so it would spike up to like 240. It was horrible. That immediately resolved, and I stopped involuntarily throwing up, which was ulcerative colitis. So after a week, the dietitian told the doctor at some point, and she told me, go home and continue your weird all-meat diet. And that's what I did. And ever since then, it was like, okay, I'm going to have some grace with myself. And I allowed myself to eat dairy. I allowed myself to use stevia because I wanted treats. So I made keto or carnivore cheesecake. And, I used spices. It was not perfect. It was not as strict, but it was primarily animal foods, and it was removing anti-nutrients. I cut out the baby spinach and all of the other keto treats. Any treat that I have now, like I have carnivore ice cream and brownies, but they also have protein. So it's going to promote leptin instead of just straight up fat, which is hyper palatable, just like carbs. Fat is energy dense. You can eat and eat and eat and eat and never be full. So now I don't do that. And I crave meat because I realize my body needs those nutrients. It absorbs those nutrients. So yeah, that was sort of a rant. Sorry.
Fine. I've done actually like made keto ice cream, or, for the most part keto, I guess, keto carnivore ice cream is somewhat the same. A lot of it's animal products.
Yeah.
For the kids for dinner, I'm like, there's so much protein in here. By the time I do the egg yolks and everything else, they're getting some nutrients, and it's hot out. So it's fun. Logan, can you please?
Well, I was having a question on
I need you to go, honey. Sorry, kids. But yeah, so I think it was basically just nutrients, that having the nose to tail or having the meat variety is what really kind of helped you heal your gut then.
And removing the anti-nutrients. So I was loading with oxalate, and I had no idea. And I believe that was, a lot of the anti-nutrients were binding to any of the actual nutrients I was eating, because I was eating meat. I started to eat meat. I was eating raw, actually, because I craved it so much. I craved raw ground beef, and I ate raw for almost a year and a half, actually. And I was even eating raw liver before I cut out the anti-nutrients, and I wasn't making progress. So, some people are fine with oxalate. We all have a different threshold, but my gut was like, no, girl, we've been done with those a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And removing those was total key into being able to absorb and assimilate the nutrients from meat.
And so you also had, 3 fecal transplants to help with the C-Diff, right? And you didn't see really any difference with them?
No. So I did feel a difference, the day after. In fact, I felt like a different person in some ways. It was really interesting. The best way I can describe it is there was another color to my personality rainbow. It was almost an alien was possessing me. I felt a different spectrum to my personality every time I got a different set of fecal matter microbiome in my gut, which was really interesting. But I could feel the C-Diff take back over like that. And on my second transplant, the C-Diff went away. I tested negative afterwards. And then one day I felt it. I felt it come back. And I went to my doctor maybe 2 days later. We tested it, and it was back. So after the 3 transplants, that's when I was in the emergency room, and I was talking to the infectious disease doctor, and he was like, the C. diff has seeded in your gut, which basically means it's just it's seeded, it's planted in there, and we can't really replace your microbiome. It's a part of your gut now, which was really scary. And they basically said you're going to have to do oral transplants for the rest of your life. So at that moment, I was thinking, okay, I already had capsules. I talked to Michaela Peterson about doing this at-home oral fecal transplants. And I was just thinking of who do I know that hasn't taken antibiotics? But I never had to do that. And I still have those capsules, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, before COVID hit, I had just been diagnosed with C. diff, and I will say that I had like multiple tests. Okay, so I had a colonoscopy with the regular doctor, and they didn't find my C. diff. I did a stool test. I did one singular sample that got sent in, and then I did a three-part sample that got sent in, and I did not find it on that either. My Clostridium levels were high, but the C. diff itself didn't come back. Even when we broke up that category and tried to look into it a little deeper. It was actually the organic acids test that found my C. diff. And I was doing that while I was doing my functional medicine training. And I do this organic acids test and I'm like, oh, there's C. diff. And now mind you, at this time, I'd done like 3 months of antimicrobials just to get rid of the dysbiosis in my gut and just to kind of like, I had a parasite blastocystitis hominis, which you can get on water, like vegetables, pretty much anything. Probably a lot of people actually have it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did 3 months of antimicrobials and I was getting to the part where I was going to like start rebuilding the gut, and I do this oats test and my C. diff levels on this oats were still like 70. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like 1-2 points away from being abnormal. But like my antibodies were gone at that time. Like my lupus had calmed down, everything was chill, but I knew that I was walking that line. Like a stressor is going to send me back over and I'm going to have a whole, another bout with C. diff and lupus and the whole nine. So I continued doing probiotics like Megaspore and stuff like that to help my gut. And I got it down to 50 the last time that I tested. But I have not got it as low as I'd like to get it for sure. So that's like another reason why I wanted to pick your brain too. Cause I have another friend, Katie Mack, who has C. diff and she's foodie and she's taking like 6 Megaspore a day. And I'm like, oh, well, I was like kind of like taking 2 or 3,
That girl's so cool.
Yeah, it's just kind of cool because she also had like the weight loss, you know what I mean? I was like, C. diff can like present so differently in different people, you know what I mean? But it definitely takes your nutrients. It definitely takes your gut health, and it's so important to get that back. And you never used like probiotics or anything to kind of rebuild your gut. It was literally just the meat nutrients and removing.
I tried probiotics and I've spent so much money on probiotics, but I actually so before C. diff, before I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme, I dealt with really bad Candida. And I just had it for years, ongoing Candida. That's when I was experimenting with probiotics, and that's when I discovered that a lot of probiotic bacteria strains can actually feed bad bacteria. So when I was dealing with the C. diff, I was like, nah, I'm not going to play with that. I did use probiotics after I was using things like oregano oil or colloidal silver to, sterilize the gut. And that's what I'll still do. If I feel like, throwing little cheerleaders in there to encourage good bacteria after sterilizing it, yes, that's one thing. But I have not used probiotics to rebuild my gut. No. Not at all. I have used animal foods and nutrients only. I believe it's the animal fat and also the nutrients. I mean, even B vitamins play such a big role into digestion and assimilation, which I didn't realize. I used to just think, oh, B vitamins, those are energy, that's it. But no, like those actually are essential for gut health and absorption. And then also the collagen from bone broth. But some people are like, well, I can't handle bone broth because of histamine. You don't need to. Just eat animal foods. Seriously, your gut will heal. It just takes time. I do think that the fat is a really big missing piece that a lot of people don't realize. You can remove interference by cutting out anti-nutrients, but if you don't actually bring in the nutrients to repair your gut, depending on how damaged it's been, you're going to keep going in the same cycle. So you really have to put in that, a lot of those animal nutrients. But yeah, I did not use supplements. I actually cut those out when I did carnivore.
That's awesome. That is definitely awesome. Yeah, it's crazy how all the nutrients work together. You know what I mean? Like we always plague it with, oh, it does this one thing. It does like hundreds of things. They all work together. And we need them, we need them all. And I think what is really testament to that sometimes is watching people who go vegan and they're missing just a couple nutrients, but yet like they're having so many symptoms of gut health issues and mood disorders. And it's always the same.
True, that's a good point.
With different, with different people eating the same way. And fat, I have to, like, paleo medicine of Hungary uses a really, high fat diet for healing. And I know that, like, in my life, I've always craved the fat. Like, I think that's why, like, keto works so well for me. And even carnivore, like, I still eat a pretty high fat diet. Like, I don't feel right unless I've had enough fat in the day, to really sustain me. And it's not for, like, a fullness thing. It's just like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if it's the lowering of the inflammation or the nutrients. I just know that, like, my body needs it. And I like fought with trying to do, like, the protein sparring, and I don't think I can do it. I think my body, maybe just because of the illnesses that I've had, just needs its fat, needs every bit of nutrients in it. So
you might get there. I mean, like, I started with a 4-to-1 fat to protein, and now I'm like 2-to-1 protein to fat on many days. I think it's also a matter of your central nervous system and your hormones. And there are definitely times of the month, especially, where I'm like, I want all the fat. And I will, I mean, I had easily 6,000 calories the other night. I had 2 racks of lamb ribs. I had butter. I was like, okay. But I didn't gain any weight, and I feel great. And then, there are other days where I'm like 200 grams of protein and 30 grams of fat. So I do think that it's a process, and I would, expect that to change as you continue to heal. But as long as you're cycling through, because everyone needs fat. We all have a minimum amount needed. And I agree that, especially if we're using fat as our primary fuel source, we need an abundance of it.
Yeah, I think I probably fluctuate. Like, some days I'll eat a little bit lower fat, and then the next day I realize, like, I'm picking up a little bit more, probably because I just want it, because I didn't have it the day before or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like the body kind of has a natural flow to it. You know what I mean? Like, once you find that balance, it really, really does kind of, you don't think about food as much as you once did. Like, a lot of it just comes naturally. Like, am I hungry or am I not? And what's interesting is, like, you had trouble, like, keeping on mass. You know what I mean? Or keeping on muscle and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when you say you don't gain weight, people are like, whatever, she has trouble, like, maintaining mass anyway. But for me, like, when I lost weight, when I was just metabolically sick, and I had polycystic, like, when I first found keto, I was easily eating 3,000 calories a day and still losing weight just because I removed the inflammatory foods. So much in the same way with carnivore, removing the oxalates, your body, if you remove the inflammation and remove the things stealing your nutrients, it will do its job,
That's such a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of weight gain is directly attributed to inflammation. Michaela Peterson was just telling me about, and I think she's posted about it now, that she recently discovered that she's sensitive to the citric acid in some foods. And since she's removed it from her diet, she's lost like 2 inches off of her waist. Oh, wow. And that's the only thing she changed. And it's just inflammation. Your body is stressed out. So I think you just hit the nail on the head. Stress can either make me gain weight or lose it. And I think everyone is different. It can change.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, like, just the effects that stress has on its body, because the stress is a big one on the gut too, but it's not always just our outside perceived stress. It's definitely our foods. And when I was metabolically sick, I mean, I ate wheat for years. My parents I was on the standard American diet, eating Lucky Charms for breakfast and all these things.
Lucky
eating. I was not lucky. So I was always overweight. And then, like, when I got diagnosed with, like, polycystic ovaries and hyperinsulinemia at, like, 26, 27, I cut all those things. And I think that's, like, again, because that wheat was inflammatory. I was eating wheat all the darn time. And I remember just telling my doctor, like, I go to the gym 5 days a week. I eat whole grains. I eat, meat, veggies, and I can't lose weight. And I don't understand why, because I'm not eating processed food. I was still eating grains, obviously. And he goes, well, Kel, he's like, you're inflamed. Like, my endocrinologist knew, like, you're inflamed. So he ran this whole panel on me. Of course, my C-peptide's high. Like, of course, everything's out of whack. My hormones, my insulin, everything. And he goes, well, he's like, you can either cut the carbs or go on metformin. I'm like, well, I'm not going on metformin. I'm too young. So I cut the carbs, which
good for you.
Was all the inflammatory foods that were keeping me from losing weight. Right. So 5 months at the gym, I lost like 10 pounds, and then eating right, within like 2.5 months, I had lost 50 pounds, and I gained having kids, but, I lost it all at once, just removing inflammatory foods. So, that's why it's kind of interesting to talk to other people, because it's like you've like struggled with your health your whole life, but you started off with a good diet, and I started off with a crappy diet and realized when I'm older, like, I can't do this. And then I get sick again on the keto diet, and I'm like, oh gosh, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I eat so well, I can't get sick. Like, I can't be a health coach and get sick. Like, I have to figure this out, But that journey is just so awesome because you can help so much more people. And we kind of touched on Candida a few times. Candida, I almost feel is like a symptom. I almost feel it's a secondary thing. Like, everyone wants to blame Candida. Yeah, they want to blame Candida for all their problems, but a lot of times it is like underlying mold issues, Lyme, other issues underneath that's letting that Candida flourish. It's having an imbalance of your gut, no matter what it is, that lets that, it's just a sign saying, hey, pay attention to your gut. Like, seriously. Right. So everybody chases Candida.
I agree. I used to think Candida was just like, well, obviously, if you eat sugar, you're going to have Candida. But I actually think that a lot of people are metabolically flexible and they're healthy and they eat sugar, they run on glucose, and they don't have Candida. There's something else going on. It's probably the integrity of your gut and the balance of other nutrients. I agree. I think that if Candida can flourish in your gut, then there's an imbalance. You need to bring in something else. There's something wrong, because our bodies should have the ability to fight that. Which is why, like, people are more susceptible to getting sick if you're not getting the nutrients that you need. Your body can do amazing things when you support it the right way. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had Candida when I was eating a standard American diet. In fact, I didn't have leaky gut either, that I know of. You know what I mean? Like, I never had yeast infections. I never had any of the, like, my teeth weren't bad. You know what I mean? Because Candida can actually be part of the reason why you have bad teeth. I experienced that when I got C-Diff, that I started to have teeth rot and bad teeth and stuff like that, just from my gut health being that far off. And I didn't realize when I had bad teeth. I just realized that my cholesterol was like 400, and I went to the dentist and he's like, yeah, you need a root canal. And I'm like, I don't want a root canal. And I tried to save it. I went to a holistic dentist in Buffalo, and we tried to like laser the bacteria out, and it got reinfected. And doing research, it's not going to heal if there's Candida in there. And so now I'm like, well, I have to pull the tooth, which is very unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I've been struggling with Candida and that bad tooth, I think, for a while, because I tried to heal it, and because it didn't really flare up. I just had this long-lasting low-grade inflammation that's now causing me problems. So I think that more so the C-Diff isn't really the issue right now. I think it's just that low-grade inflammation over a long period of time. And that's why I scream at people when they're carnivore. Like, I love that you're carnivore. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's how I prioritize my food as well. But like, if you eat a little bit, like if you have a fruit and you flare up, or you eat something outside of your normal and there's a major issue, just like one time, I'm not saying routinely every day, like there's still something you got to pay attention to and heal. And if you're ignoring it, you still have low grade inflammation, and that can cause a heart attack. It can cause heart disease. It can cause your cholesterol to go up. There's more than one way to get metabolic disease and have heart disease. And so it's so important to pay attention.
I agree. There are a lot of things that can embed themselves into our cells, not just Candida. Candida can hide. And that's what makes it so frustrating, is you think you're over it and then you get another infection. But same thing with mold and oxalate and heavy metals and Lyme. So this stuff can embed itself into your cells. And if you're just playing, if you're just mitigating, you're not getting to the root of the problem. And it's going to come back around one way or another. So you really get at the root of it. And it's not always going to be comfortable. And this is where I really encourage people to stay the course, because sometimes it looks worse before it gets better. I hate that you have to pull your tooth, but at least you're dealing with things at the root. And that's what needs to be done. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means you're actually getting to the bottom of it, because you're done. You're fed up and you're not going to put up with it anymore. So I would say, face it head on. It's worth it.
Yeah. C-Diff, ruined the teeth, but C-Diff might not be bothering me right now, but I can't ignore the consequences of having that infection for as long as I did before, being able to turn it around. And, I definitely did it differently, but I definitely had to go carnivore to have any chance of healing because I couldn't function on day-to-day life. I was so backed up and so constipated and in so much pain. My muscles hurt so bad from the lupus. I remember I was working full-time in ultrasound at that time. The EMFs from the hospital, the machine, like I would just come home and lay on the couch. Like I could not move. And everyone at work just thought I was just losing my mind, you know, that like nothing's wrong with you. Like, why do you pretend you're sick? And I'm like, I don't pretend that I'm sick. Like, I literally can't remember things. I literally like need 10 hours of sleep again. Like, this was not me a few years ago, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And it wasn't until like I went through functional medicine that I started getting some answers, you know what I mean? But nobody believes you unless you have like a standard doctor diagnosis, you know what I mean? And the funny thing is that some of those tests don't give us answers, you know, like a colonoscopy didn't find my C-Diff. And maybe because I was taking some herbs to go to the bathroom, I was taking like Candida, I think at that point, just to like keep my bowels moving because I knew that I couldn't like deal with them backed up anymore. I did a lot of coffee enemas, so maybe there wasn't the biofilms there that they even could see to test. But it's good to know, like, that, you know, your doctor can miss things. Your stool test can miss things. Like, the biggest thing is listening to somebody's story and hearing their symptoms and what they've been through. And even as far back as their birth and their childhood, like, I just want to know their whole story because something may click, you know what I mean? Like, I never knew that mono was Epstein-Barr. I never knew that that never went away. That's always in your body. Like, that's, you know, like the same thing like getting herpes. That virus is not going away. But it's not going to give you problems if you keep life under control and your diet under control and you get nutrients and stuff like that. But, you know, if you get enough stressors or you get a new infection, that Epstein-Barr, that mono can come back. You know what I mean? It can rear its ugly head again. That Lyme can maybe come back, you know, because it is really hard to get rid of all of it. You know, like you said, it becomes almost part of you, and you just need to find like that balance where your body's still getting what it needs, even with a pathogen. And I think our ancestors did that well. You know, they did sweat lodges, they did stuff like that, but really when it comes down to it, they were just in nature, in their environment, and eating meat and thriving, you know, other than possible injuries from getting the meat or dying during childbirth. They were really a healthy population without autoimmune and without chronic disease.
Yeah, I don't even, you know, I'm not sure how much they did, you know, die off and what they went through, but I do know, you know, we do know that our species started to thrive when we got a hold of fat, when we could get access bone marrow and organs, and no one can deny that. That's when we started to thrive as a species, and I think that anyone can learn from that. And I also think about, you know, our ancestors, they did eat carbs, but they weren't, anything in our produce section has been genetically modified. What they ate ancestrally, like, yeah, it's normal to, probably they were pulling berries off of bushes, just, you know, low-hanging fruit, but they also weren't living on that. They were harvesting the fat and the organs first. They were fasting and feasting. They were being intuitive. And I think that too much data can also set us back. I'm sure that, you know, I think about like how many people are afraid of too much protein and gluconeogenesis, but I'm pretty sure that's how most of our ancestors survived. And maybe that's not optimal. Maybe that is very stressful on the body, but also our bodies, you know, have an incredible ability to thrive when we become intuitive, and we can lean into that. So yeah, I just think that traditional medicine has done so much to take the power from people and make us feel like we can't think for ourselves, like we can't trust our instincts, like we can't trust how we feel. And it's really disappointing, but I am also very encouraged to see this, even this carnivore community grow. And I think that as much as plant-based lifestyles are pushed, you know, just out in the regular world, I think that the average person realizes that's not sustainable. You know, it's a fad. It's a fashion. It's not a lifestyle. And no one can really deny that. So
it's crazy. Like, we get played like we're doing the fad thing, even though it's like ancestrally kind of appropriate in the same sense as too. I was dating a gentleman, and he likes his veggies, and he was NTA, you know what I mean? And he like looked at me like I was the plague because I was doing carnivore to feel good. He's like, well, you can do it to heal, but that's not sustainable. You can't stay on that. How is it not sustainable? Like, I feel like our relationship literally almost ended because I became more animal-based, more meat-based, more carnivore, just so I could because he was like during the time I was sick and we didn't know what was wrong with me. I was like, this is the only way I can function. And like, he just thought like I was just being a nerd about it, I guess, and that I need to get off that. And like, it went against everything in his being. And it's like, I'm still here and I'm still eating meat and I'm still seeing results from it every day. And it's just like, it's a shame that there was that stigma even among like our own people, you know, like our primal people and our, you know, our health coaches, that like, we know we're still learning all this. And like, I still felt like I got ousted for, you know, being carnivore.
Yeah.
I'm a primal health coach. So I went to like a primal retreat, and like there was me and one other person there that was carnivore, and we just hit it off because we're like, yeah, did you feel like crap too? Did you have brain fog too? And we're like, yeah, you know, and like we were the only ones that like got each other, you know, because there were all these like primal treats and cookies and whatnot, and we're just like, yeah, we really need to focus on the meat or we're not going to feel well when we get home.
That's awesome. Yeah, I get a lot of flack for, especially when I post, you know, like organs and stuff, or I posted a video of me eating eyeball and I got a couple of really like not kind messages. But the truth is, we are honoring animals more than ever before. I'm using every part of that life.
Yeah.
Also, I'm eating like halal meat. These animals were raised with dignity. They lived the happiest life possible. I've never been more connected to my food. I've never been more grateful for my food. And I eat nose to tail. I eat the bones. I eat everything except for the hair. I don't use my kitchen garbage can. I don't produce waste. And if someone wants to hate on me for like appreciating the animal for all that it is, then like that, I'm not offended anymore. I used to be really sensitive about that, but like I have food freedom, and no one's going to make me feel ashamed for eating like I was created to eat. And there are nutrients in every part of an animal. God gave us meat to eat. It's biblical. So I honestly just pray for those people because they're brainwashed. And I'll also say that I've spoken to and known a lot of people who identify as vegan, and like this one guy who lives here, I got to know him, and he runs his own vegan restaurant, like cafe, and I started going for walks with him, and we would just share, like we were interested in each other. He was interested in my carnivory, and I was interested in his veganism, his passion behind it. And after a couple of walks, he just opened up one day and he was like, I've never felt better than when I was eating raw meat. He was like, I was really sick a couple of years ago and I was craving raw meat and it made me feel so much better. And he said, Rebekah, the only reason that I'm vegan is because my grandmother made me slaughter the chickens when I was a kid and it traumatized me. And that's it. So I feel like there's always something behind it that they have to work through. It's personal. So yeah, I really just, I just mind my own business and lead by example, I think. And people are going to notice, like, hey, they're doing a lot better. Hey, they're mentally stable. Hey, this girl isn't dealing with like OCD and anxiety like I am. Maybe there's a connection between nutrients and anti-nutrients. Maybe they're a real thing. So yeah. Yeah,
it's so hard to convince people that veggies are bad. It really, really is. Every day. Like, it was hard enough to convince them bread was bad, right? And then we add veggies in it. They're all looking at me like I'm an alien. And I'm like, well, you know, but really, like, if you look at the science, like, if you start digging into it, you'll see what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? Like, and even, like, looking at, like, alternative viewpoints, like some of the people that believe plants are used for medicine, you know, we had a relationship with those plants, right? They grew in nature. They had more anti-nutrients, you know what I mean? They stressed out our body in a good way. We have so many stressors right now that doesn't always work, you know, and the plants are weak because of GMO. Totally. And they're grown in a greenhouse. And, but he would say, like, he would ask the native people, like, how they knew which plants weren't going to kill them. And he's like, well, they tell me. And they could look at a plant and kind of like figure out whether it's dry or wet or, bitter or what it is and know how to utilize it. I don't know any of us in the US that can look at a plant and say, other than like burdock or something that's like completely obvious and be like, oh, I could use that to detox my liver, but that like there's a whole forest out there, and it's like, but we don't have the relationship with that anymore. And like if we, because you talk to plants, they grow more. So like these people are out there like, I need you, like I thank you for giving me your life to heal. And it's like the same thing with animals, like people that are in touch with their way of eating, like we have a relationship, to a sense of like, I'm so appreciative of this life given and for nourishing my body. And I know that in some way, it's a circle of life. Like I'm going to give back to the environment as well. And I only take what I need. Whereas I feel like the rest of us in the world are just kind of gluttonous and we just.
I agree. That's the other thing. Like when you're leptin sensitive, you don't waste food. Like when I'm done, I'm done. And I am so much more productive. I can be who God created me to be because my body is functioning. I'm supporting it with proper nutrition. I'm, honoring my body as a temple of the Holy Ghost. And a big part of that is being responsible for what I put in my mouth and being mindful about it. And I totally agree that our society is just about, I'm just struggling with cravings, or, I'm so stressed out, I'm going to self-medicate with cookies. And there's just so much more to life than your next meal. You were created for so much more. And if you're constantly a victim to cravings or illness, then you owe it to yourself and the rest of the world to get to the root of it. Because I promise, every person was created to thrive. We were created with intention. But there's just, our society is full of stress and full of, what we eat is not food. Cereal is not food. Something in a box is manufactured to be addictive and to act on your dopamine and opioid receptors. And so you've got to cut all that out and think for yourself. But yeah, I'm really glad to know you, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. And I feel like, yes, we do have differences, but we have the same goal, is to empower people and to also, not let your struggles bring you down. Like, you're going through something, but that doesn't make you that makes you a better coach. Yeah. Because it expands your perspective, and it expands your capacity to understand others and to help others. I just think that's so awesome.
I always feel like we get our struggles in order to help other people. You know what I mean? Like, it really is, because I couldn't help other people dealing with chronic infections had I not lived it at least a little bit. Gosh knows I didn't live it my whole life, but that little short bit that I got was enough for me to like look at people and be like, well, if food isn't enough, dig deeper. You know what I mean? Like, see what's going on. And some people maybe, I guess, don't need to know what's going on, but I mean, I have seen people that eat pretty darn nose to tail most of the time and still has issues, but then that's kind of where we get into like emotional healing, and maybe there's, we're stuck in that fight and flight because we're still living in stressors that aren't even happening anymore, like from our childhood, periods where we've dealt with abuse. And so there's always something more that can be dug into, even not if it's not food or a chronic infection. I feel like emotional healing is a major part of our journey too.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I thank you so much for getting on here and talking to me, and I'm really happy to know you too. I've seen you for a long time. You kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, oh my gosh, like somebody's gone through at least way more than I have, but similarly enough, like I just couldn't wait to pick your brain, so I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, we should do it again. I really appreciate you. I feel like we could keep this going. Yeah.
We could just all day, yeah. Jimmy's putting on there that we're going to go back and stuff.
I'm a biggest fan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy, for connecting us.
Yes, thank you so much. And I will let you get back to your day and see what my child needs that was so desperate in the moment. But
keto ice cream, that's when he showed up.
Yeah, probably. He probably had ice cream. It's like, hey.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.